Welcome everyone. Glad to see you on my channel. Today I will tell you about an unusual story, an amazing story about companionship and love. I wish you a pleasant audience.
It was pouring rain outside, drumming heavy drops on the windshield, but John paid no attention to it, only managing to clear the glass in time to see the road. He was in a hurry to get to an important client. Every now and then his mind was spinning with thoughts of what he had accomplished in this life. Frowning his forehead, John couldn't even think of happy moments. Working in a taxicab, he kept running into the angry look of his boss. For some reason, he immediately disliked him and gave him a shabby car. Stopping at a stoplight, John thought to himself, why didn't I choose another profession? Now I wouldn't be spinning the wheel and groveling before anyone. The light turned green and John accelerated again, but then he heard banging under the hood. The car was broken and they'd say it was his fault. They'd put the blame on him and then pay for the wreck. No, that wasn't the fate John wanted for himself, but he couldn't do anything about it because he wasn't a local in this town and hadn't made the right connections yet. Sad thoughts continued to overwhelm him. He even remembered how often the dispatcher gave good orders to his driver friends. And he was left with nothing, settling for cheap calls. Such injustice depressed John and made him think about the right choice of his path in this life. He was an orphan after all, and in any situation he could only rely on his own strength. After two more intersections, John wanted to turn into an alley to shorten the way, but suddenly a pregnant girl jumped out in front of his car. She deliberately swung her arms as if she were falling and blocked the road. John barely audibly cursed. "Have you completely lost your mind?" He did not understand why this stranger, risking her own life, almost threw herself under the car. Jumping out of the cabin, he shouted at her again. "Have you had enough of life? I'm in a hurry. The boss will punish me if I'm late. Could you take the underpass?" The girl sank down on the curb and burst into tears. John realized he was wrong to do that. She was pregnant, and there was no telling where she might be in a hurry. What if she went into labor? All these thoughts rushed through his head in a caravan, and to at least somehow make up for his guilt, he offered the poor man to get into this car. "Let's go, or you'll get completely wet." The rain, it seems, is not going to give up. Once in the car, the girl looked at him suspiciously. John even felt a chill under his shirt. It felt like he hadn't saved a man, but a ghost. Pushing away these dirty thoughts, he extended his hand to her and said, "My name is John, and I work in a cab." The answer was the last thing he expected to hear. "I'm Veronica, an ex-convict." The cold ran down John's back again, but this time it was even more intense, as if he were being hosed down. The thought flashed through his mind. "That's the kind of passenger I picked up," he said. Veronica noticed the trembling in his hands and hurried to calm him down. "Calm down, I only sat in jail, and there's nothing wrong with that, unless you're against women being behind bars too." "Yes, no, you're not?" John replied excitedly. "I didn't even think about it. Anything can happen in life, and no one is immune to it. Even I can't say what will happen to me tomorrow, for example." The pregnant passenger put her hand on his shoulder and calmly said, "I am not a psychic, so I cannot answer what will happen to you tomorrow. But I am sure that in the near future you will start a new life." Veronica's words sounded somehow unexpected for John. He suddenly thought that it was tomorrow or the day after tomorrow that the boss would find an opportunity to harass and punish. That's when a new life would really begin, without money and possibly without a job. John thought about it and at the same time remembered his childhood. After all, he had never known his parents. He came to the orphanage from an orphanage, very small, one could say, the youngest of all the wards of this institution, and he was treated without any love. Although, where could it come from if the tutors disappeared every now and then for a whole day and left them unattended? It was there that John learned to survive without anyone to rely on. He had almost no friends, and all because his sense of justice made him an outcast among his peers. They liked to organize nasty things, to run away from the orphanage, and John, feeling a sense of fear, remained alone. He did not follow them, so he did not become, as they say, his own among their company. The orphanage was in a small village, and John did not know what was going on outside the village, but he dreamed of escaping from the hated walls. and go to a place where he would be appreciated and loved. But where to? There are no relatives, and if there are, they do not care about the existence of some orphan. Moreover, the teachers in the orphanage kept telling him that his parents had abandoned him. After that, he didn't want to get close to anyone at all, and the desire to be loved was just a childish fantasy. While there was an opportunity and the state helped, John got a driver's license. He knew even then that this would be his opportunity to survive. In any case, he did not see any other prospects for himself. From a remote village, he soon moved to the capital. His thoughts were about finding a job and somehow getting a foothold in this city. John went through many interviews to get a job, but found a job only in a cab, where the boss was a proud and arrogant man, Archie. With housing too, everything was solved. John successfully rented an apartment on the outskirts of the city. However, the strained relationship with the boss constantly made him nervous. There wasn't a day when Archie didn't criticize him for nothing. Sometimes John felt like he was the center of attention or just became an outcast, and there was no way out of it unless he left the office. However, he was not going to quit and decided that he would try to prove by his actions how he could be useful. And once John even allowed himself, in the presence of the director, to say what is best used to increase efficiency. Then the conversation turned to buying new motor oil, and John joked that he knew as much about it as a professional. The director praised the guy for his initiative, but Archie was angry. After all, it was not he who distinguished himself, and now the director will not put him as an example to other employees. However, the boss could not do anything, especially since John became almost the best friend of the director. At the same time, Archie took note of this and began to wait for a convenient moment to take revenge. But the boy worked so skillfully that he gave no reason for penalties. True, after today's trip, there was no telling what might happen. After all, there was a reason the supervisor was grinning when he sent him on this call. With a shake of his head, John looked at his companion, distracted from his memories. If it's no secret, how many months pregnant are you? I'm about to give birth. I'm past 7, Veronica replied with a smile. John stopped in front of the traffic light again. I'll probably never have children. I'm alone. I haven't found my life partner, and probably never will, because I stopped trusting people. You have everything ahead of you. You just need to believe, said the girl. If you want to, you can change your life. I can see that you are a kind guy, but trusting. And that's great, but you just don't notice it and think that everything passes you by. Maybe you're right, and I do need to make some changes in my life, John said with a shrug. Veronica immediately said that she would pay him back, but she needed to get to the address. She went on to say the street and the house number. John shook his head and through his teeth said, "Come on, I don't need anything. I realize you don't have any money. Do you know how many passengers I've had like you?" "No, what's that got to do with it?" "Because all they said was, 'Wait, I'll get the money, I'll pay you.' And when I bring them to the address, they run away. No, you can't fool me, and there's no reason to do that. I won't take money from you. I'll give you a free ride." The girl bowed her head and spoke almost in a whisper. "I'm not a beggar, if that's what you think. Yes, I'd had to spend enough time in a place where you think about freedom all the time. But that doesn't mean I've lost my human form and can't be held accountable for my actions. You're wrong, and I'll prove to everyone that I'm not." John raised his eyebrows and replied jokingly, "All right, have it your way, but keep in mind that I won't take you any farther than the address you gave me. I have a reservation and I may not be able to make it in time." Veronica nodded, and for the next half hour they drove in silence. John looked at the road and the girl at her lap. She didn't cry, only her shoulders shuddered. Fixing her hair, Veronica glanced at John and smiled. He did the same, but restrainedly, the word afraid of an unexpected turn. Finally, when they arrived, John pointed out that this was a bank branch. Veronica waved in response and got out of the car. John, as promised, didn't charge her. He forgave her the trip, realizing that in such a position the girl did not care about expenses. Not only was she pregnant, but she had recently been released from prison. As she walked to the bank building, he continued to stare after her. John purposely did not move from his seat, waiting to see what would happen next. He had already mentally imagined that now the sirens would blare, police and ambulance cars would come. But 5 minutes passed, and there was silence all around, people going about their business and no alarms. Making sure Veronica wasn't going to rob the bank, he stepped on the gas and drove on. But as soon as he reached the intersection, John tapped his hand on the torpedo and said, "That's it. I've completed an order for an important client. Now he'll complain to the boss and he'll leave me without money for sure." He arrived late to the important person. He didn't say anything, but he looked at John unhappily. That was enough to make him realize that he was in for a big showdown at the office. He was silent the whole way, afraid to say a word, and the client was in no hurry to talk, staring at his clipboard. A couple hours later, John was free and driving in the direction of the office. His heart was clenching inside from the feeling of worthlessness. After all, he wouldn't even be able to say anything to his boss, and he would be right if he punished him, although there was hope that the client would not complain. Leaving the car in the parking lot, the guy almost ran into the office building. Mickey walked past him and smiled itively. There was a constant feud between the two of them. Mickey was taking over the fattest orders, and rumor had it that he was pleasing Archie with his methods. John thought about it, and it made him uncomfortable. Yes, this is now your future interior. I brought this chair here on purpose. You need to feel the hopelessness and the poverty. Do you know why I need it?" "No, I think your sense of humor is off the charts," John said with a shudder in his voice. "You're partly right," Archie said, patting him on the shoulder, "and I do have a sense of humor. But not in your case. I know all about being late. Did you think that if you left for a call in another city, I wouldn't know anything?" "I'm sorry, Archie, but I've been stuck in traffic a few times and my car's a bit of a mess." John tried his best, but he realized it was useless. And if the boss made a show of it, then it was obviously for the sake of his ego. Archie had a lot of pride. He could spend hours looking in the mirror and adjusting his tie. He loved himself probably more than anyone else. Pointing to a chair, the supervisor motioned for John to sit down. "Yes, no, thank you. I'd rather stand," he replied nervously and clenched his hands into fists. "Well, it's your business. Maybe it's for the best. I put a satellite tracker in the car on purpose. I knew it would serve me well." "What are you talking about, Archie?" "What I'm saying, John, is that I've seen your entire route. You stopped a few times. You went down a few alleys. You'd even managed to end up outside a bank. Don't tell me you have an account there and you're checking it out. Well, of course, we've abolished cell phones." John felt hot when he heard the word bank. He joked to Veronica about not robbing him. Had she really robbed him? And now he was an accomplice. Trying to push the thought away from him, John frantically asked again, "And you didn't see anything else?" "No, but that's enough for me to punish you. I just don't know how to do it in a way you'll remember for the rest of your life." "Let's just reprimand you," John said pleadingly. "It wouldn't do you any good," Archie said menacingly. As soon as he had said that, Mickey entered the office without knocking. He looked at his boss and asked without any embarrassment, "Well, have you told him everything yet?" Didn't realize what was going on. John jumped up to Mickey and stared intently into his face. "You're getting fired, buddy," Mickey replied cheerfully. John turned his attention back to Archie. "But you can't do this to me. I've done so much for you, always filling the most difficult and cheapest orders." "You upset me once," the boss said sternly. "You shouldn't have flaunted yourself in front of the director. He, because of you, stopped paying me a bonus and a raise. Do you think I can forgive you?" "No, John, you're wrong. You're fired. Get your paycheck and don't let me see you again." John lowered his head and slowly staggered out of the supervisor's office. John thought, Veronica was right when she said that my life was about to change. After that, he did not want to stay in the walls of this office. On full automatic, John went to the accounting office, took the rest of the money and went outside. The wind blew his curls and he silently stared into the void. After all, the unknown was ahead, which smelled cold. Suddenly, the bank came to mind and John shuddered again. What if I really did rob it and Archie let me go on purpose, and then the cops come? With a shake of his head, the cabbie waved his hand and wandered back to the bus stop. Now he could only travel by public transportation, and if he didn't find a job soon, he would have to walk. Only it was unclear where to get a job. John has not mastered any other profession. He has no diploma, and no experience either. It turns out that he is a man without a profession, without a family, and without a tribe. Somehow he felt badly at heart, and he barely restrained himself from crying. Passing people turned around, thinking that the man was not all right. John stood at the bus stop and whispered something to himself. At the same time, several buses passed by in the right direction, and only his grandmother, holding a heavy bag, suddenly stopped beside him. "Why are you sad? The weather is nice, the rain has stopped, the sun is warming up." "Yes, you're right, the weather is fine, but it doesn't make me feel any better. I got fired today because my boss took offense to me." Squinting her left eye, the grandmother came closer and whispered, "Do not worry because you did not do it on purpose. There will be a holiday on your street. But remember, when he comes, don't send him away. It's your destiny." "Are you two in cahoots?" John asked angrily. "All I hear is secrets. Who can tell me what's going on here?" As he waved his arms around, trying to get an answer, Granny disappeared around the corner. It was as if she had only appeared for a moment to share another secret with John. Utterly bewildered, he got on the bus and drove home. At the store, John bought a loaf of white bread and a carton of milk. He knew Perry was waiting for his master. As soon as the lock clicked on the door, the cat ran out into the hallway. She nestled at John's feet and began to rub his back. Stroking the pet, the former cab driver said, "You're the only one I'm happy to have, Perry." The cat heard his name and purred contentedly. John took off his shoes, went into the kitchen and poured milk into her bowl. Perry left his feet alone and began to eat. As she licked the milk, she looked at her master with a sidelong glance and licked. There was so much devotion in her eyes that John couldn't stand it and covered his face with his hands. He stood like that at the window, barely restraining his emotions, but suddenly the doorbell rang. John even shuddered. Strange, I'm not expecting anyone to visit. Cautiously looking out into the hallway, he asked directly from there, "Who's there?" From the other side of the door came an answer. "It's me, Anna." "John, open up, we'll have tea with you." Not knowing what was going on, he opened the door. "Why, were you crying or what?" jokingly asked Grandma Anna. "Oh well, let me wipe your face. That's better, and you don't have to shed tears." "I'm sorry, Anna," John said in an apologetic voice. "I've had a hard day today. There's no reason for fun, let alone a tea party. Perhaps you could come back some other time." "Well, what about it, John? I'm a birthday girl, in case you've forgotten. 77 years old already. I couldn't resist treating my favorite neighbor." Shaking his head, John said guiltily, And I'm so busy at this job that I forgot about everything in the world. And first of all about my personal life. Don't look at me with surprised eyes. I know you're not seeing anyone. It's about time. You're a big man and you need a family. It's no good, John, living like a bum. You'll be old before you know it." "Anna, what about your family? Shouldn't you be sitting at the table right now?" "Oh, John, you still don't get it." The neighbor began with a deep sigh. "My children and grandchildren only come for a couple hours or less. They have their own things to do and they're not interested in sitting around an old lady. If my husband were alive, I would miss him. But as it is, sometimes I sit by the window and watch others walk with their children or grandchildren." "I see what you mean," John said sadly. "But I'm not meant to be a family man. I'm always at work and I spend all my time trying to support myself. I'll have to save money soon." "Gave someone a free ride? And you know everything," John said cheerfully. "Yes, I gave a girl a ride, and she didn't have the money to pay me back. I had to let her go in peace and wish her luck. She was in such a hurry that I didn't really ask her anything." John purposely didn't tell his neighbor that the girl was in jail and pregnant. He just didn't know how she would react. What if she shamed him? He had enough shame for today. He didn't need any more problems. On the other hand, Anna would hardly blame him. She wasn't the kind of person to look for flaws in someone she respected. The tea party ended towards nightfall. John saw Anna off and returned to the kitchen. There was a half-eaten salad on the table, a few pieces of cake in a plate, and a couple of sandwiches. He carefully put the treat in the refrigerator. He didn't want to eat anymore, but he needed to think about what to do next. Starting up his laptop, John began to methodically look through the information on job sites. Everywhere required experience and education, which of course he didn't have. And that meant only one thing: to go to the movers. Their special skills are not required, Just manage to do what you are told. From that day, John had a new life. He no longer drove a car, but constantly worked in the fresh air, and it made him less and less anxious to think about the dim prospects. Was this really why he had come to the capital? Going over in his head all the things he had planned, John suddenly came to the conclusion that he had accomplished almost nothing. Yes, he had succeeded in gaining a foothold in the capital, but what's next? What are the next steps? This he did not know yet, because he had fallen a step lower and would have to start all over again. He remembered some moments of his childhood when he literally had to pull out the freedom of choice with his teeth. And if it wasn't for his wits, there was no telling where he would be now. For some reason, he wanted to see his parents, but John realized that was simply impossible. They were gone, just as they had been gone all these years while he lived in the orphanage. They gave up on the child, abandoned him, and decided to arrange their lives without him. It's like the toy store, when you don't like something and you can take it back. John tossed and turned at night and slept badly, tormented by the thought that his whole life revolved around work and home. And there was no room for love to warm his soul. Anna was right to say that it is necessary to have a loved one near you so that you don't suffer from loneliness. It is so hard, especially in old age, when it seems that life has frozen and you don't know when the day will come and you will be able to breathe a full breath. True. And the neighbor was not all so happy. She herself admitted that the children and grandchildren come for a short time. They have their own interests, so they need grandma only when they're in the mood. Such a future frightened John. He did not want to remain a useless old man. So 2 weeks passed. John got used to the new job and no longer thought about the fact that he was once afraid of his evil boss. At the same time, the image of Veronica began to resurface more and more often, although he didn't try to think about her. He was in a position and would hardly want to share his problems. No, it was not worth talking about, much less dreaming about. But the desire to see her overpowered and gave him food for thought. One day, waiting for a bus at the bus stop, John saw an old woman walking toward him. She was carrying a heavy bag on her shoulder that hung almost to the ground and waved at him. John couldn't believe that this was the same grandmother who said that there would be a holiday on his street too. Closing his eyes, he didn't open them for almost a minute. When he looked in that direction again, he saw no one. He had the feeling that he was hallucinating. But where would they come from if his health was good? John decided that he needed to get a good night's rest and not go to work on Saturdays. When he got home and fed the cat, he lay down on the couch and fell asleep. But it wasn't more than an hour later when Perry started meowing pitifully. John woke up and lowered his head. "What are you? Did you miss me?" The cat purred in response and jumped onto the couch. And just when she was near his face, she immediately hissed. John was astonished at his pet's behavior. "Did someone scare you, Perry?" "Wow." And the fur stood up. But the cat continued to hiss and back away from the couch. John sat down, and then he heard someone scratching at the door. A chill ran down his spine, just like that time. His hands were numb, and his tongue felt like it was stuck to his palate. He couldn't even get the words out. Overcoming the stiffness, he got up from the couch and headed for the hallway. Suddenly, the scratching at the door changed to a steady knock. But it wasn't a firm thump. It was as if a woman was trying to get through. Right? It must be the neighbor, Anna, John thought, and hurried to open it. But what was his surprise when on the threshold he saw Veronica, and in an expensive coat. "Hi, did you recognize me?" she asked cheerfully. "Yes, hello, you won't be forgotten. Can I come in, or are you in a bad mood?" "I'm sorry, I don't really feel well," John answered and let Veronica into the apartment. "So many unpleasant things have happened in my life that I'm afraid to talk about them. I thought you'd forgotten about me. I went to a lot of trouble to find you. I didn't realize it was so easy to get lost in the capital." "It's a capital to absorb people," John said in a more cheerful voice. "But you've spent so much time away from home, so don't be surprised. And I'm sorry to bring up your past." "It's all right, John," Veronica said and went into the kitchen. "I still have a lot of catching up to do. But one thing I'm sure of is that you can't forget the past. It's so soaked in dark stains that I'll never wash it off in my lifetime." "Wait, what are you talking about?" John asked in surprise, even though he suspected what was behind it. "This," Veronica pointed to her round belly. "All the secrets and stains are here, and if you have time, I'll tell you. Yes, of course, I'm only after work, so I'm in no hurry. Putting the kettle on the stove, John asked, "Are you hungry maybe?" "No, I've been to the restaurant and had dinner there." "What are you looking at? Can't you understand how I've changed so dramatically? Where did I get the money to go to a restaurant?" "To be honest, I do," John replied, embarrassed. "That day, when you almost fell under the wheels of my car, now ex, you were wearing old clothes, shoes not in size, and no money. By the way, I hope you didn't rob a bank." At that, John pointed at her expensive clothes. Veronica laughed and put her hand on his palm. "No, there's nothing wrong with that. The bank didn't need to be robbed. I only took what was rightfully mine." There was an awkward tension because Veronica's words about taking something were more like robbery, and John expected her to say, "I really stole the money and bought expensive things with it." But at the same time, he realized that it was impossible to do such a thing alone, especially for a pregnant woman. And to lighten the mood, and at the same time to find out as much information about her as possible, John calmly said, "It's a good thing you didn't have to do anything illegal. You've already broken the law once and paid for it. By the way, what happened? Why did you go to jail?" Veronica poured herself some tea and, taking a couple of sips, began to talk. "Well, it's a long story, and I'll start with the fact that I got pregnant by the warden." "Really?" John exclaimed and almost choked. "Yes, it's true, but I had to do it. He promised me that I could be released sooner. I'm ashamed to say it, but intimacy with him turned out to be my only chance for release. I soon found myself in a position. The warden even took me for an ultrasound. And that's when it showed I was having twins. Can you imagine? 2 boys?" "Not exactly, but I can imagine," John replied discreetly. "It's the first time I've ever heard of a prisoner getting pregnant by the warden. Usually women get there when they are pregnant, or their husbands try to get them pregnant when they come for a date. But why would you do that? You can't love them, can you?" Veronica tilted her head to the side and felt sad. She could see that John's words had touched her heart, but he couldn't imagine what was going on in that girl's soul. Their first meeting had shown how defenseless she was. And here was a sudden change in image and trusting sincerity in front of a man who was a stranger to her. "You see, John, I had no other choice. I had to go free to get my revenge." "Okay, so you didn't just get pregnant for no reason, you got pregnant to fulfill your evil plan." "Wait, don't be so judgmental if you don't know anything." "Okay, I won't interrupt, go on," John said, sipping tea from his mug. That evening, Veronica told him about her hard fate. She had to go through a lot of things, and first of all, through a series of humiliations. All because her father, now deceased, had decided to remarry. Mom died only 3 years ago, and his feelings were playing up. Veronica did not dissuade, realizing that the father is a grown man and is free to decide his own fate. Besides, he was a big businessman and owned solid assets. This gave him ample opportunities in terms of personal life. Naturally, that the holy place is not empty, and in the life of Steve appeared a beautiful woman. She was 10 years younger and easily captured his heart. Veronica saw how he was crazy about her and did not notice anything around him. True, she also had a small business, and business at the firm did not allow full control of the situation. She had to torn between home and work. But everything changed when this woman's son appeared in their family. She persuaded to take him to them. Moreover, the method of seduction forced Steve into marriage. The wedding had been celebrated in style, even in style. John put the mug on the table and interrupted her story. "Wait, why didn't your father know what he was doing? From what you said, he was just over 50 years old. 50 years old? I can't believe a man that age would lose his mind. Well, he was perfectly aware of what he was doing. He just loved women's attention. That's why he married a second time. Of course, I talked him out of it as best I could, but how could he listen to me? It was up to Daddy to decide what was best for him, so he chose a new girl." "I'm sorry I interrupted." John said, "I'm sorry I interrupted. It's just that I'd had similar problems in my life." "Well, not exactly about the wedding, but something like that. I didn't tell you I was an orphan. I've never seen my parents, and I still don't know where they are or what happened to them. I spent all my childhood in an orphanage, and there I learned to be a driver, and then I went into adulthood. It's hard when there are no close people around," Veronica continued. I realized it when I found myself behind bars. My half-brother Alex arranged a trip to the colony for me. The son of my father's new wife. I don't even want to say her name. The two of them really got on my nerves. John realized he needed a break. Let's cook something together. Let's cook something together. I realize you can afford restaurants now, but I don't have the means. I got fired from the cab company and I can't make much money as a longshoreman. Wait, so this is all because of me? Veronica asked with a gasp. You were late for a call and got kicked out. Almost. It's just that being late was an excuse. But seriously, the boss had a grudge against me for a long time. He hated me from day one. He thought I was a competitor. Why? Once, I took the initiative in front of the director and told him the best oils to buy for cars. And then he suggested his own ideas several times, for which he paid the price. Yes, the boss is a beast, laughed. Veronica parried. Well, beast, not beast, but selfish and proud. That's for sure. But it's all right, he'll remember me. Together they cooked a light dinner and ate a little snack. John noticed that Veronica was no longer acting as if she were seeing him for the first time. It was obvious that she had developed a liking for him. Looking at her belly, he asked, "Will you give birth in a regular hospital or a paid clinic? Now you have these options. Listen, what about this brother? Where is he? Didn't you say it was his fault you went to jail?" Veronica replied that time would tell and added, "Yes, that's right. Alex has failed me on every count. I trusted him with my business, or rather, I took him into the company to help with the accounting and human resources issues." "And what, he failed?" John asked. "Not a word. He made me in the eyes of the tax service. Not only that, he turned my employees against me. He turned out to be a crook, and I was responsible for everything. And honestly speaking, I don't regret it at all, because I gained invaluable experience." "What kind of experience, if you don't mind me asking?" "I learned how to survive in difficult situations. Plus, I can tell if people are good or evil. You know, that's pretty much what I went through when I was in foster care. And I think you and I have similar destinies. Stay at my place. I'll make a bed for you in the hall, and I'll lie down on the kitchen sofa." Veronica agreed, especially since she had no intention of leaving. She hadn't just been looking for John. She liked him the first time they'd met, and she decided by all means to find the kind cab driver. But as it turned out, she'd gotten him fired, and Veronica, feeling guilty, decided to remedy the situation. She saw how reverently he treated the car. After all, for him is not just a pile of iron, but a real friend. When she fell asleep in the new apartment, Veronica already mentally saw herself next to John. All that remained was to find out how he would feel about other people's children. Her story about getting pregnant in prison had made a lasting impression on him. In the morning, she heard dishes clattering. For the first time in years, the noise was not annoying. Veronica simply remembered how she had risen, almost with the first rays of dawn in prison, when all of her cellmates were already rattling their cups. But it was good to hear the clatter of dishes now, so she went into the kitchen. "Morning, John." "Morning, Veronica. What are you doing up so early?" "I'm just making breakfast, so it's gonna be a while. I just couldn't sleep well, thinking about us," Veronica said carefully. "What do you mean?" John asked, pretending not to understand. "I haven't told you everything. There are other things you need to know." "Wow, so I'm going to have to be even more surprised," John asked excitedly. "I thought that yesterday you had put an end to your past. You didn't want to go back there." "It is. The past is far behind me," Veronica replied. "But there are things that need to be done to put it to rest. And in that regard, I'd like to ask for your help. I'm sorry it's so sudden, but I can't do without you." "Great. I'm back to the day we first met," John said cheerfully, setting 2 plates of scrambled eggs on the table. "And it's as if I had to go all the way from cab driver to loader again." "John, I'm a little while away from giving birth, and I need to get back what I've lost. I was talking yesterday about how my stepbrother gave me a trip to juvie. Well, he and his mother have taken over my business. We need to punish them and take my company away from them. I put my heart and soul into it, and it's all ruined." Veronica cried, and John hugged her. He felt a shiver under his arms, and his heart clenched even more tightly. There was a girl standing before him, helpless, though she had become rich. It was in his power to help her now, and if he didn't, He would blame himself for the rest of his life. John ran his hand through her hair and said, "Okay, I'll help you, but I don't know how. I mean, I'm sure your relatives are powerful people, and they have connections that we can't get through." Veronica took the documents out of her purse and handed them to John. Here is all the money I have in my account." Looking at her in surprise, John asked, "Wait, but you said they robbed you of everything, didn't you? And here's a fortune." "Yes, that's right," Veronica replied with a heavy tone in her voice. "They took not only the firm, but also my father. He died while I was in prison. The news came when he was already buried. I wasn't even allowed to say goodbye to him." John hugged her again, but in doing so, even kissed her. He did it without any preparation, in a burst of emotion. And Veronica responded. She pressed herself against him with her whole body, as far as possible because of her rounded belly. The young people stood for almost a minute, not letting each other out of a strong embrace. From the outside, it seemed as if two loving people had met after a long separation. This time, a spark of mutual affection had really flickered between them, and John, without realizing it, said languidly, "I like you, Veronica. And I like you, John, and I knew even then that we'd be together. It's just that you didn't react so viciously to the fact that you were facing an ex-convict. What was I supposed to do? Yell and chase you out of the car? I don't know, but more often than not, people shy away or look disdainfully at those who come from prison. I don't care, I'll never blame you, and let's see what we can do with your company." Here, I withdrew some of the money from the account, but not all of it. Veronica pointed to the numbers on the documents and checks. "I had to clean myself up and pay important people to find you." John suddenly thought about the fact that Veronica might have approached his former boss, and to make that point clear, he asked an intriguing question. "Did Archie help you with this by any chance?" "I don't know who you mean, but if it's so important to you, no." Veronica replied sharply. "Other people helped me, but I couldn't expect more from them. They did their best, knowing what they were getting into. Now I need to negotiate with the lawyers and force my stepmother and her son to return my firm." John agreed to help Veronica without any money. It was a matter of principle for him now. He knew what betrayal was and how it felt to be humiliated. Together they reached the most experienced lawyer in town, and he, after a long negotiation, gave his word that he would help to sort out this tangled problem. John also learned that, as it turns out, shortly before his death, Veronica's father opened an account in her name and transferred all his savings there. Veronica's stepmother was unaware, but if she had gotten wind of it, she would have forced Steve to give her access to the money, so the father took care of his daughter's future. But he couldn't help her avoid incarceration, and he may have tried to redeem himself there. That's why Veronica decided to go all in. She knew it was the only way to get the firm back and clear her reputation. John did his best. He even had to quit his new job. He kept an eye on what the stepmother and her son were doing. Alex was living the high life. He had no problems with money because everything gave business. Observing how this guy behaves, John identified several points. And first of all, it is relaxed, lack of vigilance and unwillingness to do anything more or less serious. In no comparison was not stepmother. She followed the order of the firm and skillfully managed the entire process. It was as if she had been in business all her life. John told Veronica what he had seen. "Good. So they're not expecting me to show up," she said with a slight look. "We must act decisively so that they have no time to retreat. I'm sure these people have prepared contingency plans for emergencies." "You know best, Veronica," John retorted. "I just want you to be okay." The hired attorneys prepared the documents for the trial, and Veronica and John, in the meantime, mended their relationship. A few days later, they moved with Piri into their new apartment. Veronica withdrew the money from the account and spent it on buying the family home. Neither of them had any doubts anymore that this was the beginning of a life together. The words of the old lady from the bus stop and Anna's neighbor turned out to be prophetic. John found his way in this difficult and winding life. Fate thanked him for his kindness. Since childhood, he tried to help everyone, despite the fact that sometimes it was not easy, and these qualities made him a strong and hardy man. That's why he wasn't afraid of hardship. And he wasn't afraid to help Veronica, though he couldn't help but realize how it might end. Soon Veronica bought him a luxury car. John at first did not want to accept such a gift, but then agreed, saying that the time will come and he will definitely repay. Taking on the role of an assistant, John himself kept in touch with lawyers. At some point, they informed him that Betty, Veronica's stepmother, and Alex had moved. Apparently, they felt threatened or someone informed them that the rightful owner of the business was on their trail. John relayed the lawyer's words to Veronica. As you can see, your hustle didn't go unnoticed. Good. Let them know that they too will soon have to answer for everything. By the way, how do you like the car? Did I get your taste? Thank you, Veronica. It's the best gift I've ever gotten, John replied and pulled Veronica close to him. She felt warmth all over her body and laid her head on his shoulder. Suddenly, she heard John whispering, "You are my good ones. I'll see you soon." Not only that, he was stroking her belly. Veronica realized that John would definitely not push her and future children away. She hadn't made a mistake with her choice. He was the right man for her, and it didn't matter what other difficulties she would have to overcome. The main thing is that now they are together and no one will separate them. But Betty's evil stepmother didn't keep her waiting long. She sent to Veronica's house her beloved son Alex. But he was unlucky because John intercepted him. They ran into each other right outside the driveway. John recognized Veronica's half-brother right away. "Hello, what's your hurry? Aren't you going to your sister's?" "Excuse me, but we haven't met, have we?" Alex whispered and sharply shrank. John realized that he didn't expect such a meeting and decided to go straight ahead. "We don't know each other that well, though I've heard a lot about you, and I'm not happy about what you and your mom did." "What the hell, let me through?" Alex shrieked and tried to run into the entryway, but John grabbed him by the collar and shook him hard. "Listen, you slug, I stopped you for a reason. I know all about what you and Veronica did. This isn't meanness, this smells like a crime. Why don't we step aside so we don't disturb anyone?" At that time, people came out of the entrance, and Alex tried to address them. John reacted lightning fast, punched him lightly in the stomach, and led him to his car. "Now we won't be interrupted. Tell me who put you up to framing Veronica and sending her to jail. And don't try to lie. I'm gonna find out the truth. But then it will be worse, and I'm not kidding." Alex nodded frantically and with a tremor in his voice began to tell. "It was my mom's idea. She wanted to take over Steve's business. But Veronica was in the way, so she asked me to make the businessman's daughter disappear for a while. And you couldn't think of anything else to do but put her in jail." John asked angrily, "What else could I do but kill her?" "Well, at least you've got your head on straight here. What else do you know?" "I swear, nothing else," Alex whimpered. "I don't believe it, and do you know why?" "Why?" "Because Veronica's father passed away suddenly. Don't you think that's strange?" "He wasn't old enough to have a heart attack," Alex said ingratiatingly and looked up at John from under his forehead. "Seriously, and you expect me to believe that?" He was only 54 years old, and Steve's health was nothing to complain about. "I've already learned something, as you can see. I didn't just sit around. And I've looked into your whole life with your mom. I've got you on the hook, and don't you dare play any tricks on me." Before he could finish the last words, his phone rang. It was Veronica. "Yes, my love, I'll be right there." She was screaming and shouting. "I'm going into labor. I need to get to the hospital right away." John looked at Alex, and frowning his eyebrows, he spoke angrily. "Go, I'll let you go for now. But it's only for now. Soon the sweet life will be over for you." Alex flew out of his car and ran away from the yard. Meanwhile, John went up to the apartment, assessed the situation, and called an ambulance. Together with Veronica, he arrived at the maternity hospital, but he was not allowed inside. He had to wait for the doctor to come out and tell him what was wrong with her and how she was feeling. Half an hour later, the obstetrician on duty showed up. "You're very good for not being confused. Your wife is going to stay with us for the time being. The contractions were false, but there are indications that she'll give birth soon." "Doctor, it's still at least 2 weeks away, isn't it?" "I understand your worries, but nature dictates when your children will be born, and it's great that you're having twins. You should be happy and thank God for such a generous gift." "Thank you, but they're not." John wanted to say that the babies weren't his, but he stopped himself. Besides, the doctor thought they were husband and wife. Inside, somehow everything turned upside down and he hurried outside. Just at that moment, a window on the second floor opened and Veronica looked out. She looked at John and said loudly, "I love you." Taking a deep breath, John responded in kind, "And I love you and our children. You know, the doctor thought you and I were husband and wife. And you didn't like it when he said that." Veronica asked, "Why, on the contrary, I liked it. And I even already know what I need to do for that." "Wait, don't go away. Stay with me a little longer," Veronica asked, and pressed herself against the window frame. "I haven't had time to do anything. I need to move on and get the firm. What do you say? Should we leave it as it is?" "No, Veronica. You get ready for the birth, and I'll take care of it myself." After these words, John got out of his seat, got into the car, and drove to the law office. But they were already waiting for him. "John, have a seat." The lawyer offered him a chair. "Yes, thank you. We're all set, so we can start the trial tomorrow. And I'll tell you that Betty has driven the firm into bankruptcy." "But how could she, Edward?" John exclaimed. "Did we start all this for nothing?" "No, not for nothing. I found the right people, and they stopped the process of collapse. I think that Veronica will get the firm in a less tolerable condition. Of course, she'll have to make some investments to get it back on track. But given her financial capacity, I think that won't be a problem." "You're right, Edward, but Veronica won't be able to be a part of it just yet. She's in labor at the hospital and could go into labor any minute." "I understand, John. We'll go through you, especially since you're familiar with all the documents." After John's big hit on Alex, he told his mother right away, and they even wanted to report it to the police, but changed their minds as they received a subpoena. In addition, the benefactors warned that it will be serious proceedings, and it's better to settle things peacefully now than to look at the sky in a box later. Betty disregarded these warnings and thought she was free to decide for herself how to deal with the firm. Her son, on the other hand, refused all positions and began to pack his bags. He realized that he would definitely be nailed to the wall and shake out all the information. So in order to do something, to minimize the negative consequences for himself, he took the risk of coming clean. He called John himself and asked to talk to him. During the conversation, Alex told him that his mother had poisoned Steve. True, he had not personally seen anything, but at the same time, Betty had somehow. After Veronica's father had died, that her drug had worked and the old moneybags had gone. The cops got all this information right away, and they arrested Betty. However, they had no direct evidence and she was still charged with fraud. Alex was left under house arrest for his cooperation with law enforcement and his sincere confession. But it was only temporary, because after the trial he might have faced a real prison sentence. It took several days to unravel this insidious tangle, and all the while, John visited Veronica every day. He couldn't imagine himself without her, and she was glad that someone needed her. One time the nurse even let them be alone together, and there John, on one knee, proposed to Veronica. It was so touching that Veronica couldn't help but say yes. She said it was a real blessing for her, and began to kiss John, so much so that she grabbed her stomach and screamed, "I'm having contractions again and I think my water's breaking." Immediately, all the medical staff rushed and she was taken to the labor room. John, of course, went downstairs and waited. For 3 hours, he sat patiently in one place until finally the doctor came out and said, "Congratulations, Daddy, boys. One is 3,700 and the other is 3,500. At this point, John cried and hugged the doctor tightly. "How happy I am to have had 2 sons." Then he said this phrase again, but so loudly that it seemed that all the patients in the hospital could hear him. Even Veronica smiled when she heard. She was lying in the room, and next to her were her 2 babies. She looked at them and tears were streaming down her face, but they were tears of joy. The next day, John came to the law office again. Edward informed him that Betty was charged with fraud and would not be released anytime soon. Alex, on the other hand, might get probation. But most importantly, the lawyer added, "We can get Veronica's firm back. Now we are preparing the documents, and I think that in a week or 2 everything will be finalized. In the meantime, congratulations on the birth of your children, and may you all be well." "Thank you, Edward, but..." I know. That's why I'm saying it's gonna be okay. John realized that the lawyer was in the loop. And he was. He'd be sure to keep it a secret, especially since they'd become practically close friends. A week passed and Veronica was being prepared for discharge. John came to pick her up in the car he had bought. He decided to wait until it was packed and brought a bouquet of flowers and champagne. A minute later, a cab pulled into the yard and Archie got out. He met John's gaze and said loudly, "What people are you working as a cab driver again? And who trusted you with such an expensive car?" "Good day to you too, Archie," laughed John, "but this is my personal car. Your car, on the other hand, looks like it's been in need of repair for a long time." "Oh, come on, it can't be." And at that time, Veronica and the children appeared. "Darling, aren't you tired of waiting for me?" John handed her flowers, the nurse champagne, and took the babies in his arms. "No, darling, what are you? I'm ready to wait even forever." After kissing Veronica, John turned to Archie and said sarcastically, "And how come you've been promoted from supervisor to cab driver?" He wouldn't listen, though Archie was mumbling something else. They didn't care about him, because the most marvelous thing in their lives had happened. A week later, Veronica herself came to the lawyers and thanked them with the successful completion of cases. Her firm returned to the rightful owner. Edward tried and in an accelerated manner formalized all the necessary documents. He also appeared in court as a defense attorney and provided evidence of how Betty and her son Alex had fraudulently taken the business from Veronica. She regained her reputation and was able to stop the bankruptcy process. Together with John, they decided to run the firm, and in order not to lose driving experience, he agreed to be her personal driver. "Why, that's even better. You don't have to bring in an outsider." "Okay, sweetheart, but it's only as a part-time job. The rest of the time, you're my assistant." Betty got the maximum sentence on that count and went to jail. Alex was recognized as an accomplice, but for the fact that he cooperated with the investigation and wrote a sincere confession, got a suspended sentence. And no one heard about him anymore. He left for the countryside and decided to do some farming there. Soon Veronica and John got married. They were favored, and in a week they were married. The words of the old woman at the bus stop came true, and they also had a celebration. And it was good that John did not give up his happiness. Anna and the doctor from the hospital were invited to the wedding. They didn't really have anyone else to invite. Veronica had no parents and John was an orphan. And so it's the same fate for the two of them. After the babies were born, they were registered in John's name. He insisted on it, saying that it was not a matter for them to be brought up in an inferior family. Veronica did not object because she saw her future only with John. On the other hand, her stamina could only be envied. She had endured so much and had not lost heart. The firm with difficulty, but they pulled out of the financial crisis. Now it is fully functional and generates income. True, the whole staff had to be changed. They were saturated with hatred for Veronica, and they could not be left. John himself recruited new employees that all went through his system of checks. Veronica hadn't forgotten about her father either, and she picked a time to visit his grave. He was buried next to her mother, though he was lucky in that. Veronica stood by the tombstone for a long time and cried. Fate had treated her cruelly, but she also corrected the mistakes she had made. Or maybe it was her parents from heaven who helped her daughter to cope with difficulties and find love.